Hello everyone, welcome to today's lecture. So today mainly we'll be learning about metabolism of proteins. To be more precise, we'll be mainly learning about the catabolism process of proteins. And when we talk about metabolism or catabolism of proteins, we basically are referring to metabolism and catabolism of amino acids. So don't get confused with the two terms. Metabolism of protein is same as metabolism of amino acids. So before we begin with the actual content of this lecture, we must first review and brush through some basics so that we can have a better understanding. So let's check out some basic knowledges that we need in order to understand this lecture. Let me also tell you that this chapter will be covered in two classes. So today and the next class we will cover this chapter of metabolism of amino acids. Now let's begin. So metabolism, we have already learned that includes chemical changes that takes place in the body basically. So basically it has two parts. One of them is called anabolism, the other one is called catabolism. We have learned from previous lecture that anabolism basically involves synthesis of large molecules from smaller molecules, and we have seen that for this process to take place we will need ATP in the energy. As a form of energy we will need ATP in order to perform these reactions. The most common examples are, let's say, if we want to build a polysaccharide or a disaccharide, so our monomers that we have glucose can be combined together to form so. The second part of the metabolism includes catabolism. These are the processes by which larger molecules are broken down into smaller molecules. And this process does not require energy, but rather it releases energy. For example, if you break down polysaccharides into glucose, it may release energy in the form of ATP. We have studied this already. Or if you break down lipids or proteins and so on. So all will these result in production of ATP. From the previous lecture, we have also learned that there are several stages of metabolism. If you remember from last class of mine, that we have a stage of hydrolysis, the first stage, if you remember. This includes breakdown of larger molecules into smaller molecules. It includes a stage of pre-preparatory, where certain smaller components are broken down to provide energy. And the last one we have seen was an oxidative stage, where the reducing equivalents that we get from these food materials are passed to electron transport chain to produce ATP. So here you can see here protein, carbohydrate, fats. These are basically broken down into smaller components by the process of hydrolysis. So basically hydrolysis means digestion from the GI tract. Stage 2, synthesis of certain intermediate products. So for example, through the process of glycolysis we generate pyruvic acid, which can be ultimately converted into acetyl coenzymes. Similarly for proteins, amino acids, and then it can be converted into acetyl coenzyme. The last stage is oxidative breakdown, which will take place in the mitochondria, we know, by the process of oxidative phosphorylation. Now let's emphasize on how does the protein catabolism takes place. Okay, let's see this diagram over here. So catabolism, we know that is the breakdown of larger molecules into smaller molecules. So in this case, okay, when we have proteins, these will be basically hydrolyzed or broken down into amino acid. By how? By breaking down their peptide bonds. So basically we'll break down the peptide bonds and the larger proteins will be converted into amino acids and then peptide. Second, what happened is deamination, the process of deamination. De means removal, and amination in this case will be removal of the amino or ammonia or amine part of the amino acids here. So in this case, amino acids are converted into ammonia and organic acid. The organic acid that is produced during this process can be later on used by the process of glycolysis or Krebs cycle to generate ATP. The third step includes removal of ammonia from the body. Ammonia is very toxic to us, especially to our brain cells. So it can cause several damages. So it must be removed from the body. So how is it done? It's basically converted into ammonium and then ultimately into urea. So this is just the whole process in a nutshell. But we will need to know in details about this process of protein catabolism. So you can see here, proteins are broken down into smaller parts that we have seen here. And when I first already mentioned that metabolism of proteins means metabolism of amino acids. So don't get confused about this. Okay, you see here, metabolism of amino acids is also a part of nitrogen metabolism in the body. Why? This is because nitrogen is the exclusive or the chief source of our chief source of nitrogen in the body is via protein and amino acids. And how do we get it? We get it via our dietary proteins. These dietary proteins that we take in usually cannot be stored, but rather it can be used to synthesize protein, or it can be broken down into smaller particles. So now, before further going into details of these process of catabolism of protein, I want you guys to have a very better understanding of amino acids basically. So what we need to know, let's see. First of all, what is an amino acids? Amino acids are a group of organic compounds. We have already learned this basically, and it will have two groups basically, two functional groups to be more precise. One of them is your amino group, the other one is being the carboxyl group. The amino group is denoted by, as you can see here, NH2. Carboxyl group is denoted by COOH. In total, there are 300 amino acids that exist in nature, but only 20 of them will occur in protein, only 20. So basically, an amino acid will look something like this, as you can see here. 4 different groups attached to a central carbon. This central carbon is also known as chiral carbon. So it will have a hydrogen attached to it. It will have an amino group, a carboxyl group, and a side chain R group, which can be anything from hydrogen atom to anything else as well. Now, what does these amino acids do usually in our body, and why it's so important? So amino acids are very important because they play a very important role in our nutrition and as also in the metabolism. You will also should know that around 10 to 15% of our body's ATP production or energy production are from our protein and amino acids. A larger portion is from carbohydrate, we know that, but our proteins and amino acids are also involved in this. They are known to synthesize peptides, okay, or polypeptides or even proteins. So amino acids can be used for these functions. See here, about 75% of the human bodies are made up of chains of amino acids. So that's why it's so important for our bodily functions. The chemical reactions that takes place in our body are also dependent on amino acids or the proteins which they synthesize. So how do we classify these amino acids here? Okay, so this is the high yield content. So you should be having a very good idea about this. Okay, let's see here. So there are 20 standard amino acids, okay, that is found usually. These 20 amino acids are divided into 7 distinct groups. Number 1, aliphatic amino acids. Number 2, hydroxyl group containing amino acids. Number 3, sulfur containing amino acids. Number 4, acidic amino acids and their amides. Number 5, basic amino acids. Number 6, aromatic amino acids. And number 7, amino acids. So let's see what are these amino acids basically. Let's go into details about each one of these groups. Number 1, the aliphatic amino acids. These are the most simplest form of amino acids. They will have only one carboxyl group and one amino group. So you need to know which amino acids are aliphatic amino acids. These are glycine, alanine, valine, leucine, and isoleucine. These amino acids will have one carboxyl group and one amino group. Okay. Number 2, hydroxyl group containing amino acids. Under this group there are 3 amino acids: serine, threonine, and tyrosine. Number 3, sulfur containing amino acids. Under this group there are two amino acids, cysteine and methionine. Number 4, acidic amino acids and their amides. Under these come 4 of them: aspartic acids, aspargine, which is the amide, glutamic acid, and glutamine, which is also the other amide that we have. Number 5, basic amino acids. Basic amino acid includes lysine, arginine, and histidine. So these lysines that we are talking about, have you seen these lysines in any other group before? The lysine that we have, okay, we haven't seen here. Okay, so this lysine is also a basic amino acids. Number 6, aromatic amino acids. This includes phenylalanine, tyrosine, and tryptophan. Okay, tyrosine we have seen also in the hydroxyl group containing amino acids. So these are coming under both groups, aromatic amino acid as well as hydroxyl containing amino acid. Number 7 is amino acids. Okay, so these are basically proline containing pyrroline. This is a unique kind of amino acids. It has an amino group instead of an amino group. That's why we're calling it an amino acid. The structure you can see over here. Rather than NH3 is having NH2. The amino acids that just you saw can be also classified based on their polarity. Again, into 4 groups. Amino acids can be classified into 4 groups based on their polarity. Number 1, non-polar amino acids. These are basically hydrophobic amino acids, means that they fear water. They have no charge on their side chain. This includes alanine, leucine, isoleucine, valine, methionine, phenylalanine, tryptophan, and proline. Number 2, polar amino acids with no charge on R group. Okay, the previous one was our non-polar one. This one is polar, but they also, like the previous one, don't have charge on their side chains. Okay, but they may have hydroxyl, sulfhydryl, and amide, which may participate in bonding of protein structure. Example: glycine, serine, threonine, cysteine, glutamine, aspargine, and tyrosine. Number 3, polar amino acids with positive side chain. That is, they have charged. The previous 2 we have seen there was no charge on the side chain, but in this group there might be positive charges. And under this group there are 3 amino acids: lysine, arginine, and histidine. Number 4, polar amino acids with negative charge in their side chain. Under this group comes aspartic acid and glutamic acid basically. So this is the second way of classifying the amino acid. The first one was classified into 7 groups. The second way, we classified them into 2 groups. Now let's see a third way of classifying the amino acids based on nutrition. They can be classified into essential and non-essential amino acids. So basically, essential amino acids are those which our body cannot make. So in order to get them, we have to rely on our diet. And they're very important for our proper growth and also for body maintenance. So we must have them in our diet. These are essential. We must have it. However, our body can't make them. So we have to rely on our diet. There are in total 10 essential amino acids you can see in this list. Among these 10, 2 of them are called semi-essential: arginine and histidine. So you must know these essential amino acids, the high yield contain. Second, non-essential amino acids. Again, under this group comes 10 amino acids. Now this one, why we're calling it non-essential? Because our body can make them. We don't need to rely on diet for these amino acids. Our body can make these amino acids. So we had 10 essential amino acids and 10 non-essential amino acids. Under this group comes glycine, alanine, serine, cysteine, aspartate, aspargine, glutamate, glutamine, tyrosine, and proline. Okay, so this is the third way of classifying an amino acid. The last one, how we can classify the amino acid, is based on their metabolic fate, that what will happen with these amino acids at the end. So based on this metabolic fate, we can classify the amino acids into three groups basically. One of them is called glucogenic, the other one is called ketogenic, and the third one is that it will have both glucogenic and ketogenic fate. It means that some amino acids which are glucogenic will ultimately play a role in the synthesis of glucose. The amino acids which are ketogenic will ultimately play a role in the synthesis of fat. Okay, so let's check out. First one, glycogenic amino acids. So they'll play a role in the synthesis of glucose, alanine, aspartate, glycine, and methionine. Ketogenic amino acids, they will play a role in the synthesis of fats, leucine and lysine. Okay, now let's check out some important definition. Now why we are doing these, why we are learning these basics and these definitions, so that the ultimate content of this lecture can be easily understood. Okay, so I hope you understand this. So the first important definition is nitrogen balance. The nitrogen balance is defined as a comparison between nitrogen intake that we have via dietary protein and the loss that takes place in our body by the means of feces, by the means of urea, ammonia, and so on. So it is very important because it can be used to define the overall protein metabolism and also can be used to check the nitrogen requirement of an individual. Now, there are three states known for our nitrogen balance. Number one, normal adult. In normal adult, the nitrogen balance will be in equilibrium. That is, will be balanced. So the amount of nitrogen that we are intaking will be equal to the losses. Number two, positive nitrogen balance. The nitrogen intake in these individuals is more compared to their loss. So usually this can be found in children who are in their growth phase. This can be found in pregnant women, etc. The third one is negative nitrogen balance. In here, the loss is more than the intake. This can be due to starvation, certain disease conditions, after surgeries, or let's say after burn, and so on. For us humans, in order to have a healthy condition, we need a proper protein requirement. So usually in a healthy individual, in adult, the protein requirement is 0.8 gram per kg of the body weight. In certain conditions, this requirement may increase. For example, as always, we have seen the last slide, in positive nitrogen balance, for example, in cases when you're going through growth or pregnancy, this requirement is increased. Also in cases you have an illness or major trauma. So in these cases, the protein requirement may be increased. Under certain condition, the protein requirement may be also decreased. For example, patients with hepatic failure, liver failure, or patients with renal failure, they are advised to take less protein than usual, because why? Their liver, their kidney, as it's damaged, it's not working properly, so that's why they cannot properly handle proteins. Okay, so usually you'll see we have something called another definition, biological value for protein. What does it mean basically? It is actually a measure to have the idea of the amount of dietary protein required to supply essential amino acids for maintaining the protein in our body. We have learned that essential amino acids cannot be synthesized in the body. It should be provided by our diet. So proteins from animal sources such as meat, eggs, they usually have a high biological value because they have all of the essential amino acids. Proteins, if you are taking from plant sources, let's say you are a vegetarian, usually have a low biological value. So those who are vegetarian must take combination of plants in order to supply themselves with all the essential amino acids. Because usually if you're vegetarian and only taking one type of protein source, you might be deficient of essential amino acids.